Welcome to Audiobooks with Anna. I'm your host, Anna Clements, and in this episode we're talking to Khai Dattoli, an audiobook casting director from Podium Audio. Khai shares her stories about her background and her work within the industry and delights us with a live walkthrough of her casting process. Take a listen. Huge thanks for joining us here today. Thank you very, very much for coming into Clubhouse and saying hello to us. And I really just wanted to take advantage of the fact that you had posted recently that you'd moved to a new job. And I thought it might be an opportunity just to get to know you and to say hello. So welcome. Welcome to Clubhouse. Welcome to Audiobooks. Welcome to Narrators Assemble.
So happy to be here.
Great. Let's start at the beginning. Tell me about you and tell me about before audiobooks.
Well, once upon a time, I was just a young lady from Wisconsin who came out to go to school at USC in Los Angeles. So that's like the beginning, where I got degrees in both theater and German. And I have that type of background actually surprisingly came into play in audiobooks, where one of my first jobs in audiobooks was combing through a script for teaching German audiobooks, like English language education type of audiobooks. And because I knew how to read German and I could communicate with German actors, I was able to help facilitate casting those books. And that was one of my first jobs in audiobooks. And from there, I transferred very easily over to things that were speaking English, because that also happens to be a language I know. Yeah, but I guess that's the shorthand to how I got into it and prior from it. But also with a theater background, I've done a lot of theater and wrote a lot of it too and helped produce it. And and so I've always had the mindset of when you look at something written, how it should sound, because that's very much what writing a play is like. When you're casting a play and when you hear the right voice, then it casts itself pretty much. And that's kind of what I've taken into audiobooks in general. I love finding the voice that is supposed to be telling the story.
I love that. So back us up to the beginning of your career then. So you've just graduated. Your life is ahead of you.
Yes, my life is, well, actually, before I even graduated, I got my first opportunity to be in a film because I did have a focus on acting at the time. And my brother was working for a director by the name of David Lynch. And I had an opportunity to be in a film with him. And one of my first jobs was being a prostitute.
Excellent.
The classy things we do when we're 20.
I bet your parents were so proud.
They actually came to the premiere and I was so nervous. It's not like I didn't have any nude scenes or anything like that. I was on Hollywood Boulevard and I had track marks on my arms and things like that when we were filming. It was a very surreal experience. There's a really funny picture that I took with my brother where I was like, look, I got my little sister her first job, and I looked terrible on Hollywood Boulevard. It's a really fun story now looking back on it. But yeah, I was so nervous for them to still see it because I was like, I don't know how proud people would be of this. But they both came back from that saying that they thought it was such a cool experience to go see a movie premiere and that I was in it and all that fun stuff. So
it must have been everything you were looking forward to, the teamwork and the concept of being in makeup and being on set. It's everybody's dream.
Yeah, it was such a surreal thing coming from almost straight off the boat from Eau Claire, Wisconsin to Los Angeles on Hollywood Boulevard and like in a trailer and cameras going and all that stuff. It was like, whoa, I just hit the jackpot on dreams here. This is too cool. The weird thing about that, though, is I didn't realize that the track mark makeup that they put on my forearms to make it look like I had a drug habit, it didn't wash off very easily, and it was the summertime. I remember because at the time I got a cash payment for that day, and later it became a union project. So I was trying to deposit my money from it at the bank the next day with track marks on my arm. I'm like, this looks bad.
It's a concept.
Taught me to not judge anybody, and the
I was
whole
gonna
world
say,
of performance is amazing.
Yes, as an actor, it's amazing how we become aware of how people react to us when we look different or are different, and what a fantastic way to kind of go, oh, okay, people.
Yeah, definitely learned that. But that was actually one of the things why I wanted to transition more into theater and writing my own things. Is I kind of got typecast for a part in just being dumb blondes. And it was
Yeah.
frustrating to me. And I was like, there's more to be said. And women in their 20s aren't just stupid or like the romantic material or whatever else. There was a lot more depth to them. They could have other relationships other than being a romantic interest. They could be funny. They could have friendship bonds. They could have work struggles. They could have all these things, but they weren't opportunities at the time that I was getting. So I was like, well, if you can't find them, why not make them? And so I started
Yeah.
writing comedic plays with that type of goal in mind of showing women and well, all sorts of people just in a more varied situations that could be out there.
Fantastic.
And yeah, and that I loved that opportunity. And I had a few plays in Los Angeles produced and one in New York that ended up being on Times Square, and it was really exciting. And from that, actually, that was Bob and Deborah Deyan came to see one of those plays, and which is how they asked me to come and work with them. And that's how
Oh,
I initially got into
what a
audiobooks.
great segue. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely, I had no idea you were a writer. That's so exciting. And what a great, as an author, as a playwright, what a great way into what then becomes, well, let's keep going with the timeline. The Deyan people come and see you and they find you and they take you with them back to Deyan. I'm assuming this is not relatively recently. Uh,
Oh no, yeah, that was back in at the beginning of
okay.
2016
Yeah.
that I started working in audiobooks. And yeah, like initially I was doing adaptations for different audiobooks that were a lot of nonfiction and didn't make sense necessarily in audio format because it would be referring to a graph or a chart or see chapter 3 and you can't see
Yeah.
it because you're listening to it. So I just made some script changes and things like that to make those more accessible. And also at the same time, those education books came up with German. I was like, I happen to have a German background. And so I was
Yeah.
working in casting with those. And then from there, I just kind of was doing all sorts of different pre-production things. And as time went on, when I first started working there, a lot of projects were kind of at the time coming pre-cast and just having to reach out to the narrators they wanted. But more and more, people were getting busy and the industry was blowing up and you'd need to have alternatives. So we were suggesting alternative people for the spots, and the more and more publishers were like, hey, why don't you just cast it from the get-go and just give us
Yeah.
auditions and present people? And that transitioned to
Fantastic.
mostly what I did.
So talk
And
to us a second about
yeah.
that conversion. So I can see why Deborah felt the need to bring you on board, as a playwright and as an actress. The idea that audiobooks, of course, were particularly non-fiction audiobooks, have
Mm-hmm.
huge sections of them that will say, as you can see from the graph below, of course, nobody can see the graph below. And that choice
No.
I know that Sean Pratt, for example, has a very strong opinion about the idea that you should be describing everything that's on the page. Are you a believer that it's just as easy to opt out and just ignore that section? Or did you take each case as it came? How did you pick and choose which bits to leave in or how to convert them?
Well, there was a couple of different ways, and it definitely depended on the book and the type of material that was being presented, and considering who the audience was going to be. Because a lot of times, this is not their typical audience that you would have for somebody who's listening for enjoyment or pleasure. This is like somebody is actually needing to digest information in a helpful way. So having that mindset in mind, it kind of varied on the material that was going to be there. But half the time when I was thinking about it, it's a lot of dense information, something that was going to be really intensive and you'd want to refer back to. You should have something physical to refer back to, even if it is an audio format. So I recommended having a PDF file that came with your purchase of the audiobook. So if somebody's talking about something and describing it, you can look at a visual of it as well and have something to refer back to at some point. So in those cases, it would just be switching the audio to look at image 3F in the supplemental materials PDF,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. But there's other situations where that doesn't flow with what you're trying to learn about, or the information is more digestible in a different type of way. So that if it was talking about a graph that was showing a trend over time, that's something that's much easier to describe. Like as time went
Yeah.
on, there's a conversion thing that you can put for that. Just
Yeah.
in 2016, this was how many there were. By 2020, it was this many. And so, yeah, it
Yeah.
could have just been a graph before, but now you've explained it in a way that makes a little bit more sense.
We do
So,
love a PDF download, but I think it's important sometimes to remember that a lot of work goes into these books before we as narrators ever get them. them, the conversations you're having with the authors about what will and won't translate, as it were, into audio. It's really important to remember the behind the scenes, because I think sometimes as narrators, we imagine these magical books landing on your desks, and then you just, touching the shoulder of the lucky narrator that happened to get to like some kind of fairy godmother,
Oh yeah. There's a lot that can go behind the scenes on adapting something, so all of a sudden it does make sense. And sometimes
Yeah,
there's still things that get missed, but yeah, even as
yeah,
simple of like, if you read here, you're like, if you listen to this part, listen to chapter 3, or refer back to instead of see chapter 3. It's
yes, yes.
just little tiny tweaks here and there.
Fantastic. So talk to us about your time at that first job then. So I'm assuming that as the years went by, so you were there 6 years?
Yeah, 7 years
your
actually.
your job must have changed, and you must have seen the big changes that have been occurring over these last 7 years.
Oh, yeah. Like the big one obviously came with the pandemic and the huge change to more and more home studio narrators and people having to be by themselves and isolated to continue their work. And there was such a boon in how many narrators were able to record themselves then. And so that was already a massive change, and how many people had to. So there were people who became more in rotation and some people who became less, just because of how willing and able they were able to adapt with the times. So that was one of the main things of, and then some people like can really do well or prefer actually to record on them by themselves because they're less self-conscious, or you can get more immersed in the book or things like that, where other people, it takes them out of it when they have to deal with technical aspects while trying to perform. So it's been an interesting adaptation to see how that comes through the times.
Talk to us a second then about, because I when I think about home studio, I think about us, all these people who are sitting in the audience, and thank you to everybody who's joined us today. Most of us have home studios and spend most of our time perfecting, tweaking, changing, upgrading, sorting ourselves out until we're really happy with the sound that we've got. But I'm aware that because of the pandemic, a lot of actors, and not just because of the pandemic, there is a need to use famous voices, famous faces, who ordinarily would have gone into Tarzana to record and suddenly couldn't. Were you one of the studios that was under the glorious joy of sending equipment to somebody else's house and having them record on their kitchen table?
No, that was not. We actually did not have to send materials or equipment to anybody for that situation. So that was lucky.
Brilliant.
So but that also became for when you had to find voice alts for a lot of situations. Somebody would want somebody like this who did not have equipment, so who sounded like them, who could deliver by the specs that were required, by the budget that was required, by everything else. So that, yeah.
But it threw it up in the air for
So
you in a different way, didn't it? It sort of was just more juggling of admin rather than physical hardware.
Yeah, that was the more challenging part of it, yes. But I mean, I don't think anybody wants me having to deal with their hardware anyway. I am terrible when it comes to technology.
It's important that we know our strengths, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean, I know how to do a punch and roll. I can record somebody else. I've helped people with different demos and things like that. But if it comes down to really the technical nitty gritty of it, it will break if I look at it. So.
Fantastic. Continuing on then, pandemic madness aside, what allowed you to move across to Podium, or what required you to move across? Was it they just make you an offer that was too good to refuse?
I mean, that is kind of, yeah, that comes down to it. I have nothing but great appreciation for the education that I got from working at Deyan and all the experience I was able to get and the growth that I was able to get there. But yeah, ultimately, a lot of things come down to getting an offer you can't refuse. And one of the things that came with it was benefits. And it was a very competitive benefits package. I have a daughter and things like that. So I had to consider what was going to be the most beneficial for my family. But I left on the best of terms, and I wish nothing but the best for everybody there. And it seems like everything's been very amicable on both sides.
Well, I can
a huge relief for me.
Yes, absolutely. I can attest to being a narrator who you hired and then abandoned.
I'm
and
so
the
sorry.
no, no, no. The project went very well and is over and done with now, and it was all smooth sailing. So they have dealt with very well with you leaving, and that there was no issues of sort of transferring across. Sometimes you work with different clients, and perhaps the person you were connected to moves, and then nobody seems to know who's in charge. And you'll be glad to hear that Deyan have it all in hand, and all went well with the project. So thank you for that.
That's wonderful. That was one thing that was hard. I had a bunch of projects that
I'm
were still in the
sure.
works by the time I left, and I was wondering like, oh, I want to see how they go, and I hope everything just keeps going smoothly. And
Yeah,
a few things where the casting decision hadn't come back, and I was dying to know who ended up getting it and things like that. But
yeah, yeah.
mhm.
Everything's still up in the air. So in my head, Deyan has been around for 30 years. Feels like forever.
Yeah, since
And
the
they
80s.
they seem to, oh wow, they seem to have a very specific kind of, they don't go out purchasing book rights. They're doing books in collaboration with people.
Yeah, they're a
Whereas,
production house, and yeah,
okay,
where I moved to is a publisher, so that is a very different
so yeah,
situation.
talk to us about that a second, about that
Uh,
shift of kind of, the company aims.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like I'm doing the same thing that I was doing before, but it started off with my non-dominant hand. So that's what it felt like. But yeah, with the main differences I've noticed from coming from a production house where you worked with all the different publishers and all different things, and you weren't the ones who were acquiring the rights of the books or feeling that out, and it was just very much, yeah, I got what came to me and made sure it got into production and done. Whereas now working with a publisher, I'm not actually doing much producing at all. I'm just doing casting. I'm just focusing on finding the best voice for each book and project. I have a lot more author communication than I did before because most of the time it was going through a publisher who's communicating with the authors and things like that. But now I am the publisher, and I'm the one who's talking to the author and finding the best voices for their book with them. Or sometimes that's not even in the contract, and I just make the best bet on myself. So there's a little bit more casting control than I had before. There's a little bit less variation in the types of material that come through. I mean, there's still lots of different genres and things like that, but I really had no idea what was going to land on my plate any given day when I was at Deyan. And here I have a little bit more. I kind of know what I'm getting into with all the different books, and I really do like the material. I think they do a really good
Sorry.
job finding good book and well edited projects.
Yeah, yeah. So slow down for me a second, because I'm
Mhm.
kind of feel like I'm catching up. So
Oh,
at
sorry.
Podium, are there how many casting directors are there, and how do you control a particular area or just a certain number of books, or how does it work?
There are four casting directors at Podium at the current moment, and we have a casting associate. And the four of us kind of have a workload divided up between the projects that are coming in that need to have audiobook narrators. And the workload is fairly evenly distributed between everybody. I'm the newest casting director on board, so it's kind of finding my niche in there. But I get a smattering of all the different genres the Podium does, and they do a lot of focus on like fantasy, lit RPG, romance. But I've done some nonfiction as well, and they have thrillers and etc. But yeah, so that's kind of been yeah, I guess that's the best way. It's just an even split of who's coming in, of the new projects that are coming in as the scripts are ready, as the publishers, or as the publisher, or sorry, what do you call it? The acquisitions lead get an author on board, and then once their script is ready, there's kind of a rotation of who's up, I guess.
Yes,
So
yes.
nobody's overworked.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite part of that transition through from kind of meeting the author or finding the book and somebody getting the book into the company, and then finding the narrator, creating the project? It's such a, when you look at it almost like that process, it's a long one. It's not,
Oh yeah.
for us
Well,
as
they have
narrators, it's,
amazing acquisition leads at Podium who I have so much admiration for, because I feel like it's such a privilege to be able to find somebody to voice a story and bring it to life, but to actually find the story from its creation, from its creator, and find which story you're going to put into the ether. That's such a huge responsibility, and such
yeah.
like I have such admiration for how they do what they do and find the people who they want to amplify their voices. Yeah, so I don't actually have much choice in who the authors are, but I think the people who do are really great at that. And I just get lucky to be able to communicate with them once they're on board.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, interrupting us a second because we've been joined by Eliza. Thank you very much for coming up to the sofa. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I have a little bit of a cold, so
Oh,
my voice is a
yes,
bit off.
yes, every narrator's nightmare. I wish you well with
Yes.
that.
Thank you. Thank you both for being here.
I just wanted to introduce you now in case your question had something to do with what we were currently talking about. So over to
Yes.
you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Actually, it was. I was curious. I see a lot of fantasy and lit RPG coming out with male leads. And Kai, I was curious if you've noticed any trends with more female leads coming out as a narrator who's primarily interested in those genres.
Yeah, I have found actually that there's more coming down the pipeline, and I think that's something that is being an evolution of that genre. I think historically it's very much a male-dominated area, but as RPG, lit RPG, and just RPG games and things like that in general become more widespread, I think that's branching out into all genders and all different backgrounds and types and things like that. So I have things have come across my plate that require a female narrator for those as well. So don't despair.
That's so good to hear. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, while Eliza's here, can I ask Kai how do you? This question was coming much later on, but how do you best like to be contacted if somebody has a particular forte or a particular genre that they're looking to get into or do more of? Is there any particular way that you like to be contacted, or are you
Yeah,
just
email
open
is
to?
great. Email is the best way possible for me in general. And there's two ways you can do that too. But to get the max benefit for a narrator, for Podium specifically, if you do casting at podiumaudio.com, you'll get the full casting team right on there. And if you have links to samples of areas and genres that you are interested in, that is the best way to do it. Emails can fill up really fast, so having hard samples attached to an email aren't always ideal. But if you have a link to something, that is great. And even background information, the more we know specifically about who you are, the better we can find a niche that's going to work for you, because you never know what little character thing is going to come into play. It's really funny. I was talking to somebody before a quick pitch that the APA does, what they used to call speed dating, about what to say and what to do. And I was just mentioning different background things that sometimes come into play are handy, like these things you wouldn't even think about. Like somebody who's an army brat, if you tell me that detail, I'll be like, ooh, they've lived in a lot of places. They probably know a lot of different accents there, or a lot of different, comfortable with maybe some different languages and things like that. And a different narrator ended up saying that they're an army brat at the most recent one. I made a note of it. I was like, see, there you go. You never know what detail about your background is going to trigger something that's going to help somebody with casting a project. So little
Yeah,
details about your
fantastic.
background, put them in them.
Yes, yes. Kate, hi, welcome.
Hello, hello. Thank you for being here, Kai, and thank you, Anna, as always. My question is, do you have any choice in the matter of what books you cast? I was just curious, like, do you get to kind of pick and choose a little bit, or are they all assigned? And then, like, if you do, what are the ones that you gravitate toward?
Oh, good questions there. So there's a lot of that are just coming up as assigned, but I do have the option if I see something coming up in the pipeline that I'm really fascinated in, an author I really like, or a story or genre that I'm really into, I can make a note of it. And I have a fantastic supervisor who wants to make people happy and is really good at her job. So if I make a mention of that, she's happy to shoot something over that's going to be in my wheelhouse. I love fantasy books and things like that. I'm not even a closeted nerd. I'm a very out and open nerd.
Love it.
So that type of world and realm is something that really speaks to me. And anything, of course, that has a strong female, I always hate the strong female protagonist, which insinuates that there are weak female protagonists. But I don't know a better term for it, but yeah, like the really I guess, badass women. I'm a big fan of finding any books that are in that type of realm and wanting to do that. There was a book that I had recently that just made me so happy. It was about a trucker woman, and it was hilarious.
Fun.
And she was foul mouthed, and it was in the sci-fi world. And I was like, yes, this is what I want to do. So that's my jam there. But there's a time and a place for everything, and I don't really try to judge material as it comes at me because art is art.
The feeling about Podium is that it focuses on independent audiobook publishing and acquires titles then from self-published authors. You mentioned earlier, and I appreciate this isn't about you, so sorry, that they have a great acquisitions person. Does the company sort of focus on, you mentioned sci-fi, fantasy, romance, non-fiction. Does the company kind of focus in those genres and that area so that they can be better at those things rather than trying to branch out into anything and everything?
I think there's a little of both things. I think I know Podium is definitely branching more into different areas, but they're also, when you're really good at something, you can do it really well. And focusing in on certain things can give you, it's like branding. It becomes something that you can both help somebody in that genre become really good if you're the best at what you do. So there's this a positive angle of looking at being kind of specific in some of those areas, but also it's where are the biggest fan bases and things like that. Where are the audiences that are wanting to be reached and are out there? People who are listening to audiobooks specifically tend to like certain genres more than other types of genres. I'm not saying that all books should be, I think every book should be an audiobook for the most part. There's some exceptions. I don't think hate speech needs to be an audiobook. We can put those on a shelf. But yeah, for the most part, I think anything out there that has an audience, that's what they're trying to do, is really be able to get people who have great stories in areas where people are very avid listeners anyway, have access to the best stories that there are in that genre.
Yes. Brilliant. We've been joined by a non-house member, Paul. Thank you very much for joining us up here on the sofa. What can we do for you today?
So I just wanted to ask a kind of technical question. So we wrote a business book a couple of years ago, which is doing much better than I thought it was going to do. And people have said, could we do an audio version of it? And I'm severely dyslexic, so obviously that makes perfect sense to me. And whilst if you have a wee look at my bio, it says I'm a professional speaker, people have suggested I do it myself, but I'm well aware that there's a difference between a professional narrator and a professional speaker. So how do you figure out who's the right person to narrate the book? How do you figure out who's the right voice? Or to put it a different way, if you were getting somebody to narrate the book, how would you figure out what was the right voice for that book?
That's a really good question. For example, if it was a book that is written by like a more first person perspective, even if it is a nonfiction book, I definitely look into the background of who the author is. I try to do a lot of matching to an author's background because they'll feel probably a better connection with the material anyway, coming from the same background. I find videos of the speaker online so I can hear what they sound like, their cadence and things like that. And frequently, I do love to auditions for this purpose too, because I can send a link to a speaker and send a page from what they wrote and say, how would you do it? And see what comes back and rings the most true with me. And then I'd like to put it past the author and see if they agree with me. So, yeah, I guess it's coming down to, I don't know if that answers your question completely, but I have at my fingertips at least 3,000 different narrator emails. And so I have a decent roster of people I can refer to. So if there's a certain voice, there's people who are going to already populate my mind. Also, I'd like to look online and see what books are out there are in a similar area and genre who's done some material in there. I'm not saying that that's only the only options, is you've had to have previous experience, but it does help as a reference point and have some more options.
Interesting. So this was combined, because I am severely dyslexic. This was co-written between me and my wife and business partner. So there's kind of a male and a female voice in the book. I think that's one of the things that's made it quite appealing, to be honest with you. So it's kind of looking for that voice that would represent both parties. I think is quite interesting, and I'm finding it quite challenging.
It can definitely be a challenge. And if there's things that are, if it's the whole book is written from a dual perspective, like there, you can't tell whose voice necessarily wrote each different section, then that is more focusing on who is somebody who really knows this type of material, who really knows how to get across the story, the information, and in a way that's going to sound accessible and not forced or tedious on the ear or anything like that. But if it is something that it has distinct sections written from two different authors, I'm very much a fan of casting more than one narrator to be able to get those two different voices across.
Thank you. That was really helpful.
Yeah,
Can I ask, just following up on Paul's question, so if, for example, we were looking to cast Paul's book, would you be tempted to find a narrator with a Scottish accent? Would you be looking for an authoritative American voice to sell it in an American market? Where do you start with even beginning to, I mean, you said you go and look up the author and find out about them.
Well, I guess
what are the priorities?
I don't know it depends a little bit on the topic. I'm not sure, Paul, what your book is about. Do you mind sharing at least the genre? Or,
The book is a kind of business angle. It's how to write a business plan based on the UK property market. So it's not really an international book, although strangely enough, we've had sales in the USA, which I don't really understand because it's very much written from a UK perspective. But Americans must be interested in what we have to say over here. And it's very much a how-to book, if you like. It's a how to fill out a business plan for particularly in the genre of property.
Do you have a lot of personal experience situations that you reference to?
Yes, we do. We talk about
in that case, then I would match the accent because how you're talking about your personal experiences might actually reflect specifically for somebody with a Scottish background. It might not necessarily come into play, but I also think that might be something just when you wrote the book, you write with a certain cadence, even subconsciously a little bit, that might come about in a more smooth way with somebody with a similar background. I would probably ask for a little bit softer of an accent to make it a little bit easier to understand for people who aren't used to a Scottish accent. But I would definitely, at least at the bare minimum, keep it as a UK accent because you're talking about UK business specifically. So even if the people in America are going to be listening to it, you're going to be making references, there'll be certain things. And even, I know this sounds silly, there's certain things that are spelled differently, even if they're pronounced the same, but that can cause a narrator to stumble and hitch sometimes. It's very subtle, and this is me being super picky, but even those little tiny things like that sometimes will make a slightly smoother experience when you're listening to it. So that would be my 2 cents, having not read anything about it and just the limited information you gave me.
We really did put you on the spot, Guy, and I think it's the fact that you said that you were being really picky. I think that's what makes you good at your job. Ultimately, for me, the casting process is where it's at. You know, once more often than not, when I get cast well, the book is a really easy read for me because the reason I've been given it is because I'm well suited to it. And it took me a really long time to work that out, to kind of acknowledge the fact that I'm not suited to everything. And yes, I might be able to do everything, but the books that aren't within my life experience take more prep. They require more thought processes. That, you know, it's a longer process on my part when I could just be working better at what I do well. So it just makes perfect sense. So thank you for that. Kate, Eliza, did you have anything more you wanted to add before we sort of move on just to the next topic?
No, just a big thank you.
Yeah, I'm good.
Cool. Are there any differences you've noticed moving from one company to another? And I think you covered this a little bit with regards to moving from a production house to a publishing house. What I'm really asking, I think, is in sort of company feel. The industry is such a gorgeous place, isn't it? I mean, it's just lovely. And both Podium and Deyan are lovely. And I'm not looking for any kind of gossip. I'm really after our jobs affect our family lives. And that change is, you know, it's, as you said, is a big deal and a big thought process. Are you happy with your move?
Yes, I have been happy with the move. It's been, like I said, a massive change on a lot of fronts. Well, one of the biggest things actually is I commute now. I had been working from home since 2017, and now I go into an office 3 days a week. And that was a huge change. And initially, I kind of was not excited about that aspect. But then I've actually really come to appreciate it, and being in an office with people who I'm working on the same things, of feeding off of their energy, working from home, especially right now in the summer, my daughter's not in school. And so there can be more distractions with that. So having a place to really focus and be in the world with it. And it has honestly been the biggest change, is going into an office again, which sounds really silly because that really has nothing to do with audiobooks at all.
No,
It's
it was
a
exactly what the
work-life
question
thing.
was. Yes, it was really, I think I'm really conscious that after the pandemic, a lot of people wanted to make big changes in their lives, and some people did. And some people have just gone back to the way they were before and aren't as happy as they were. And I was just curious about whether the pandemic or whether the change of job, it's obviously been a huge change within your social life and your family life. So I'm glad
Oh
it's all
yeah. Yeah.
gone so well for you.
There's also been I've been looking at audiobooks and books in general in a different way, because I'm sitting next to people who are in acquisition, sitting next to a marketing team, people like on all different things. I never paid attention to the marketing of an audiobook before. It didn't affect my job, and it wasn't what I was there to do. I was there to just
Yeah.
make the book. And I wanted the narrator to do well, because that would reflect well on me and do well for them. And I love the audiobook community, the narrator community, big fan. But outside of that, it didn't really matter to me as much. And now I really want every book to do really well, and how that is marketed in the long run. And I've learned how it's beneficial to both the narrator and the publisher if a book does well, because that increases everybody's chances at success. So
Yeah.
there's little things like that a whole overarching thing that I've learned so much about already, just from making that one little change. So yeah, I never thought having a social media presence was going to be that key to a narrator. And now I'm like, oh man, it really does affect in some of these communities, especially the lit RPG. They are such an online community
Yeah.
already. So if you have an
Yeah.
online presence there, it makes a huge difference in how well a book's going to do and how well a narrator is going to grow in that area.
There is a fascinating thing to be had about genres and the entire party that they have on Discord and all those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very separate, the sci-fi lit RPG people, and then the romance people, who also seem to have a language of their own and podcasts of their own. But it's fascinating to kind of see those whole industries within the industry, almost how they work and how they
I've
come
done so
about.
much more romance since coming here too, and it used to be something that I just was something I was like, oh, just romance. But now the dedication of the fans in romance, it's really impressive, and so I really appreciate the narrators who always take it seriously, and they actually enjoy what they are doing, because it matters to somebody on the other end of that microphone.
Yes, very much so. I must just comment that we've got 20 minutes left of the room. If anybody'd like to come up and ask some questions, please do raise your hand. I'm having trouble. I've got two people in the hands raised section, and Clubhouse isn't allowing me to bring them up. So I apologize for that. If you wanted to put your question in the chat, I'd be more than happy to read it out. But we have been joined by Rebecca. Rebecca Lee, hi. Welcome to the stage. And what are your thoughts?
Hi, sorry I'm kicked out of my apartment today, so there may be some traffic noise.
No worries.
But I was wondering, speaking of social media, I always get kind of nervous when posting about audiobooks. I'm always very careful to make sure that it is once the book is out. I never post anything beforehand, but I'm wondering if you have any kind of do's and don'ts about posting about the audiobook.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's going to differ on every single project, honestly. So whoever a producer is on a project, be sure you check in with them. But I know for the most part, most Podium books, they are a big fan of posting about it and letting people, like, don't give a spoiler away of what's going on in the book. But they will be sure that there's cover material ahead of time, so you can post that, like, hey, coming up is this book that I'm doing, or it's in this genre. They're also really good about having the narrator's name on the cover art of the book. So when you post it, your name is on there, not just like the author and the book title. So that's going to be a little bit more fun thing. So anything that's going to have your name on it, you should be able to post it whenever you want to. But a general rule of thumb is just always check with your producer. And if your producer gives you the go ahead, they might even give you some suggestions. They could even give you some helpful hashtags or something like that, help you make a really good campaign. They also have a whole marketing team behind them that might have some ideas or some other videos that they can tag you in, or will help you cross promote some of those things as well. So the more communication you have with the whole team in general, it'll go really well. However, there are some times when they want to do like a reveal of something, especially if you're on a book with a really well-known author. in the genre, they're usually trying to be very specific with their timing on when information about their next book is coming out. In those cases, you really do have to be careful to not post anything before you've gotten the okay. So I guess the super short and easy thing, check with your producer, and every publisher is different, but Podium is really usually about just get it out there.
That's cool.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Hopefully.
Rebecca. We've been joined by Khai Bender, who's an author and the host of many a good room here in Clubhouse. Hi, thank you very much for joining us up here on the sofa. What's your question?
Thank you, Anna. I run the Writing to Sell House, which has 34,000 members, one of the larger houses for writers. And Anna has been most generous enough to agree to be my guest this Sunday at 11:20 a.m. Eastern Time. So I just want to quickly let people know that we're doing an episode on audiobooks with Anna and hopefully some of her talents. Please feel encouraged to come, raise your hand, come on stage, get exposure to the writers who will be in the room, and to also lend your own knowledge about audiobooks to a bunch of writers who are interested in the subject. Again, it's for Writing to Sell House, and it's starting at 11:20 a.m. Eastern Time, and I'm super excited that Anna's going to be gracious enough to be on stage. And that's all I wanted to share. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. Hi. Can I ask if you, now that you've taken advantage, if there's any chance of you putting a link or some details at least in the chat so people can check that out? And of course, if you press on Kai's face, you'll see the rooms and the houses he runs and the things that he's got coming up. So you'll be able to find the link to that room and to all the other rooms, which are fantastic. The Writers on the Storm, there's all sorts of things you do here on Clubhouse that are wonderful to follow. So thank you very much for all your efforts and all you do for all of us too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Andrea, hi. Welcome to the sofa.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Anna. Hey, I have a question for Khai. Actually, it's a two-part question. Hey, Khai, did you ever have a husky? Ever on your Facebook page?
A husky on my Facebook page?
Yeah.
I might have at one point, like the smiling husky face.
I don't know, because I have a husky. I have a Schnauzer husky, and I remember you came to speak. I'm in Elise Arsenal's. I was in her narrator's class, and you came and spoke, and I could have sworn I looked you up, and you had a beautiful husky, and now I can't find it. So maybe it was
I never
someone
had
else.
a husky. I never had a husky, but I've always my daughter, when she was a little kid, would constantly make the face of that husky, who just like the meme of the husky making a big smile. And so there was a couple of times I had posted that, but I wish I had a husky. I love them. I love dogs in general, but
they love to talk. Huskies love to talk. They try to talk. And then part two. I'm looking at your Facebook page, and it says Michaela Aseng. Is that your real name or your?
So my maiden last name is Aseng, and my full first name is Michaela, but I haven't gone. Yeah, Michaela is very complicated for a lot of people, and people butcher it to say Michaela. So
you see, I just did that.
It's a very difficult name in general. So when I got married, my husband's last name is Dattoli, and I was happy to get a last name that was easily pronounced. And then
I gotcha.
Since I was in my 20s, my brother's called me Khai my whole life. And I found if I introduced myself as Khai, people got it right. So I just went with Khai for the most part.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I'm Andrea, and I get Andrea, and people are always asking me. And so I understand totally about doing just a portion of your name that's easy to pronounce.
Easy digestible. That's mostly I had my 20th year high school reunion this year. And so if people were looking for me, they were going to go by what my name was in high school.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I left it in the parentheses there. If people are trying to hunt me down.
Figure out if you were you.
Yeah, being like, wait, I thought I was friends with this person. Who's this stranger with a different name? You're like,
Right.
no, we still know each other. And yeah, people who know, like my husband calls me Michaela. My mom calls me Michaela.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like my family still does that. But for the most part, everybody calls me Khai.
Okay. And they probably love saying, hi, Khai, right?
That's always what it is. It's easy to remember that way.
Okay. Well, thanks. The husky thing was bugging me. So thank you.
No worries.
Khai, can I just ask, when you're looking, we were talking earlier about narrators and voices, and you talked a lot about sort of sci-fi and fantasy. What do you look for in a narrator? And I'm mostly focusing, I think, on the idea of accents and voices and being able to do good characters, or are you looking for an overall great listen? And what does that mean to you?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. And I mean, a performance can be very subjective to a lot of people. I like to hear no effort, if that makes any sense. I can hear if somebody's trying really hard at something, and that can kind of distract me a little bit. So if somebody is over enunciating, sometimes that takes me out of it a little bit. I want it to be clear and understand, but if you're focusing so hard on that, then I'm focusing hard on that. And I want to be focusing on the story. Same thing with an accent. If an accent sounds like it's work, then I can hear that it is work. So the more you practice it and go over those lines ahead of recording, or you really have that in your wheelhouse, it's going to come out flawlessly and you're just being the character. And I would more err on the side of being a character than making sure you have a technical detail correct. Because as soon as I hear the effort behind somebody's job, then that's all I'm paying attention to. I want to get sucked up where I forget that I'm in the office right now and all of a sudden I'm on a different planet. I want to be in your memoir. I want to be in the throes of a romantic moment. I don't want to be hearing the technical aspects or the thought process behind it. If that sounds a little harsh, and I know that there is so much technical effort to it, and not saying that you shouldn't have like things should all be effortless, but to make it sound as effortless as possible is what I am trying to find when I'm listening to somebody.
That's actually one of the best answers to that question I've ever heard. So huge thanks for that, because that really actually gives us something to work towards. That's a great piece of advice. I absolutely love that. So I have so many more questions and I feel like we're running out of time, but I must ask my favorite question, which is, what's your favorite emoji?
Oh man, you couldn't have prepped me for that one. All right.
People get worked up about this one, saying like, you mean the one I like to receive or the one I like to send? Do you mean the one I use the most? And I'm like, do you know what? It's actually just a conversation starter.
No, it's such a good one. I think my favorite emoji, just because I never know what it means, is the upside down smiley face. Anytime I get it, I don't know what it means or what somebody's trying to convey exactly, but it makes me laugh. So,
love that.
Like, are you actually happy? Are you trying to turn, like, I don't know.
Brilliant. Yeah, do you know, I've asked this question now, I don't know if it's 8 or 10 times, and we've had a really different answer every single time. So I'm going to have to start writing these down. Thank you. I'm going to ask, these are really quick questions now because we're running out of time and I've still got more. Your daughter does a fabulous British accent at 5 years old. Are you training her to be an audiobook narrator?
Oh man, well, she'll be so thrilled to hear that it is good. I've heard that from a couple of Brits, and that comes from watching the Junior Bake Off on Netflix. We watch that together, and we like to do baking together, and that's her thing. So my husband is an audiobook engineer as well. There's definitely all of the tools in place should she want to do that. And she definitely loves performing. She says that she wants to be an actress. She just had a debut of her first short film that she was a tiny little thing in the back for. But it's something that I'm letting her explore on her own time. If she has fun and wants to do it, I think everyone should do art as much as they possibly can. I'm not going to push her in any direction for it. It's just I will make sure she knows that these opportunities are available to her, but I'm not going to, she's 5. We'll see where she lands.
Absolutely love that. I also noticed in your, and I apologize for investigating you so thoroughly, but in your Instagram, there's a picture that says made to order mysteries, made spelt MAID. What's that about?
So I have a murder mystery company that we do different themes and all different genres under the sun. Things that are from the classic Clue to Avengers or Star Wars or Harry Potter or like all sorts, Harriet Potter. And sometimes we do fundraising for it. We'll do private events. I've done a bachelorette party. We do a ticketed event once a month. This month's theme is nursery crimes, which is an irreverent take on nursery rhyme characters. So it's a bunch of different nursery rhyme characters, 3 men in a tub who are kind of a throuple, or Mary had a little lamb, fleece as white as snow, that she's a drug dealer. And this is the whole little world that we, everybody takes a little personality quiz. I give them a character depending on how outgoing or shy they are and how murderous or not they are. And you show up, get all your clues and information, try to solve escape room-esque puzzles and figure out who's the murderer. Or if you show up and find out that you are the murderer that night, try to get away with it.
Do you know, my next question was supposedly, if you didn't do audiobooks, what else would you like to do? But it sounds like you're already doing it.
Yeah, I love telling stories in every capacity. I love mysteries and murder mysteries in general. I love just trying to figure out what's going to happen, what is the story behind somebody. And everybody is kind of a mystery in that point where you're just trying to figure out who people are and the story behind them. And I'm so lucky that I get to be involved in storytelling in so many different facets. So honestly, if I wasn't doing audiobooks, I'd be telling stories in another way. Yeah, I would be doing more plays or something like that. And I hope to be doing more of those too, as my daughter's getting older and I have a little bit more freedom to go back to some of those things. But yeah, just telling stories. That's all I want to do with my life. I think the more we hear stories from other people's perspectives and immerse ourselves in other worlds, the more open-minded we all are.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Love that. I think you need to put that on a T-shirt and sell it. Maybe that's your next side hustle. I must just ask as a last question, just as we finish up, if you look back to when you graduated, has it worked out like you thought?
Absolutely not. Oh my gosh, no. But it's worked out in such a great way. There was the other day, I was driving home from work at Podium, and I was driving by the beach, and it was a beautiful sunny day, and I saw palm trees and all this stuff, and there was part of me that just started laughing because I went back to me as a kid in the Northwoods of Wisconsin and not having the best time there and wanting so badly to break free from a lot of the situations that I was there at the time. It was just, I didn't feel like I fit in very well there. And I really wanted to be in a creative storytelling atmosphere. I was desperate to go to California, and just juxtapositioning that 11-year-old version of myself to where I was right then. I just laughed out loud and I was just like, I'm lucky and I am happy. So yeah, it's not the road that I would have thought I was going to take, but it's been a great road.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And congratulations. Well done you. I think that's a great life goal, and long may it last, and long may you continue to do everything you please.
Oh, thank
well
you so
done.
much. This has been so lovely speaking with you.
It's been great, and it's absolutely flown by. I was so worried that I was going to run out of questions, and I have 3 left that I didn't get to, but we have come to the end of our time. So
right, next time.
Absolutely. We'll have you back in a year, maybe do an anniversary of you starting at your new job, and you can tell us how you got on. Thank you so much for joining us today, Khai. I'm just going to do a quick wrap up here and then close the room. So huge thanks to you for spending this hour with us. My takeaways: Podium is lovely. And if you like science fiction, fantasy, romance, nonfiction, get in touch. If you're good at what you do and you can make it effortless, let them know. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Khai Dattoli. Thank you very much for listening in and joining us on this podcast. Do remember to like and subscribe. It really does help. Further details are in the show notes, and if you'd like to work with me or need any further information, do get in touch. Thank you for listening.